Careful driving home.
All right, so why is it that for...
So I tried to say that, James, in a way. I was trying to watch my words there because I didn't want to say, because especially if some old friends see this video.
Yeah, they're going to be like...
I go, what do you mean? Everything was through violence. And then when I meet them, I'll say, yeah, well, it was, man. Your strength and your power came through your violence. There was a great story, which I told you about, I think, about my one friend who went to jail. I told you that story?
Yeah, he said do this one move and he...
Right, and then he came out of jail and he ended up going back to the same bar. Remember that story?
Oh, no, I don't think I remember the end of it.
That's a great story, and he goes back to the same bar.
Do you want water too?
Well, that's about, I don't know, I guess we could tell it, but it was...
Not on camera.
Huh?
Not on camera. What if the guy
Well, I'm not gonna say his name.
Well, forget it,
Yeah, but it's just a great story because that's really represented what violence was to me. Human violence, not creative violence. He goes to jail. I showed him a movie. Actually, because of that move, stayed in jail for 5 more years because he's incited a riot. But he didn't get raped. And he gets out of jail. He went to jail for stabbing 7 people in a bar.
7?
7. He ends up getting out of jail 15 years later. I ran into him at a bagel shop. And he's telling me the story. The second time I ran into him in the bagel shop. And he goes, 15 years later, I get out of jail. Maybe longer. I think it was 15 years. I went back to the same bar that I went to jail for. I'm in the bar, sitting down, drinking, with all different... The bartender was still there. He said, but there's all new people in the bar. Started a fight with the bodyguard, the bouncer there. The bouncer guard knew, I heard stories about me, took off. The guy who apparently must have owned the bar, which was a different name now, but same bar, said to him, hey man, that guy's going up to call the police. You should get out of here. At that point, I got up and got out, and the police were already pulling in the parking lot. I took my knife. He still had a knife on him, right? And I threw it under the car. The cops came out and grabbed me. Apparently they saw me throw the knife somewhere. They found the knife. He says, I was laying there with the cop's foot on the back of my neck and handcuffs in the dirt. And I looked up and I turned and I saw the bar. And I said to myself, what the hell am I doing here? 15 years later, the same bar that I went to jail for, I'm back with a knife, right? Again. For some reason, he said, the cops let me go. They let me go. Didn't
It's
give
old
him a
habits
knife.
die hard.
Well, he got up and he said to me, which was really brilliant. He said to me, which he still hasn't changed. I kept tabs on him a little bit. He said, I realized at that point that my violence, this was his words, was my strength. That whenever I was violent, I felt strong and I didn't want to let it go. That's why I went back to that. And that's why I did the crimes and stuff that I did, because the violence made me feel invincible. And when I was laying there and I looked up at the bar, I realized that everything was different at that time. And I just looked at the bar and I looked up, and I'm speaking for him, in his voice, and I realized, what am I doing here? That the violence that I felt was my power. What if I was able to change that? And I don't know if he really did. I don't think that he did. I know he doesn't commit the violent acts that he used to, but his life is still pretty messed up. But the point was, it was just so intuitive to me to what I should be actually teaching. Every human being is violent when it comes down to it. The difference is like there's violence in that they take advantage of other people, and there's fear of violence, which is the type of people I think that mostly I teach, people that are haven't been subject to it. And there's the difference. Here's a guy that stabbed 7 people, goes to jail for 15 years, comes back to the same bar and realizes that's where he felt comfortable, and he had to leave that comfort zone if he wanted to evolve and grow. And that same guy walks into a home of 2 decent people, we'll say, whatever society deems as decent. They have their jobs, their family, and he just barges in because he's the bigger and the more aggressive, and he understands violence, and the family can't protect themselves. And I believe that's also wrong. There's also fear there. There has to be a balance between those two. But I thought that was so insightful of this one guy, you know, who belonged to all these different clubs and just did a lot of, you know, bad things throughout his life.